Heathrow Airport has a net zero plan. I mean, come on. It's 183 million gallons of jet fuel every year are consumed roughly by the jets that fly in and out of Heathrow. And yet your government has created a net zero plan? I mean, it's just, to use your Britishism, gobsmacking.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. I'm Michael Simmons, the Spectator's economics editor. Now, the management of Heathrow and the national grid are still having a bit of a fight over who's responsible for last week's outage that grounded flights for a day and is probably going to have damaged our economy. To discuss this and what it says about Britain's energy resilience, I'm joined by the author and journalist Robert Bryce. Robert, thanks for joining Spectator TV. What do you believe was behind the power outage that brought Heathrow to a standstill and grounded so many flights? Do you think it was a problem of infrastructure, a problem of management, or both?
Yeah, I think it's, both. I think there's no definitive cause that reading up on what the latest investigation is that hasn't been determined. Now, there's also a possibility that this was sabotage, although I think that's probably unlikely. If it was, someone would have likely stepped forward. But I think that, what does this show? It's clear that whether it's in the UK or here in the US, we take this infrastructure for granted. And it shows how easily this critical infrastructure can break and what can the knock-on effects that happen when it breaks. So Catherine Porter wrote a very good analysis of this on her blog, What Logic. But she pointed out that there weren't redundant systems and redundant pathways for transmission lines into Heathrow. So that's a blunder of the first order, given that the airport is critical infrastructure, but also that the transformers themselves, there weren't ready backups, there weren't ready ways to shift the power to other substations. So a number of factors, obviously, disasters like this serious incidents like this never have one cause. It's always several.
And how do you think, when you're planning an upgrade to an airport, or when you're planning a new infrastructure project, whether it's in the US or over here in the UK, are these things just not thought of, or is it just that an outage like this would be considered so rare that the businesses and the governments behind these projects think we're not going to put redundancies in place because it would be so expensive? Why was this not foreseen?
Well, in everything, everything's 2020 vision in hindsight, right? Well, why didn't we fix this? Weren't we paying attention to this? But let me put that to the side for just a minute, Michael, and just put forward something here that I think has not been given the proper focus. Heathrow Airport has a net zero plan. I mean, come on. What? Your airport has a net zero plan. And so in 2012, what did they do? They put in, this has been reported, a biomass plant that was producing some combined heat and power and had some electrical output, 2 megawatts or something like this. But it wouldn't run unless it was attached to the electric grid. So I just did some calculations. I went on ChatGPT and said, well, how many gallons of jet fuel are consumed at Heathrow? Well, it's about 6 million tons, 6.2 million tons. It's 183 million gallons of jet fuel every year are consumed roughly by the jets that fly in and out of Heathrow. And yet your government has created a net zero plan. I mean, it's just, to use your Britishism, gobsmacking. I mean, loony round the bend. I mean, who's behind this? I mean, we're going to run them on hydrogen. That was one of the other things in the net zero plan. I just thought, the silliness of the whole thing. And it's inattention to the importance of what that transportation infrastructure, it's inattention to this. And, then a lot of, I would say, woke climate policy that, displays a lack of attention to the critical infrastructure that the airport needs.
Do you think the public views on that specific point about the sort of, not hypocrisy, but the silliness of some net zero projects, do you think the Overton window is shifting on that? Like, as you say, it's plainly ridiculous that what is not just an airport, but is also Britain's largest cargo port, could have net zero goals at all, when, like, literally, as you say, it is a very carbon heavy thing. It always is going to be, unless someone suddenly invents, solar powered planes. Do you think the public are waking up to how silly these things are and that they don't marry up well?
Well, I think the public is, but unfortunately, I think the Tories and Labor haven't. Now, we do see a different tone coming from the Tories now with Kimmy Badenoch, and that's refreshing. And you say the Overton window, I think it has shifted. I think that look at what has happened in Germany with the election of the new coalition government there, that there's some real sobriety creeping into their energy policy. We've seen the same with here in the U.S. with the election of Donald Trump. Now, was energy the key issue here in the U.S.? No, of course not. There were a lot of other factors. But now that Trump is in office, we see a complete shift in terms of energy policy. We're seeing somewhat similar moves in Canada. So I think internationally, there is more sobriety creeping into this whole discussion around energy and power and economics. Unfortunately, and your colleague Freddie Gray and I've talked about this, it doesn't seem to be really seeping in there in Britain. And you've seen just last September, the closure of your steelworks at Port Talbot, the last blast furnace in Britain was closed. Now one of the homes of the Industrial Revolution, you can't make virgin steel. I mean, it's indicative of just a complete lack of understanding of the importance of energy to your economy.
And moving on from the public, the political leaders that have made these decisions, how do you think we got here? Is it like an environmental zealotry where we say, like, we don't care that we've destroyed industry, we don't care what this does to economic growth, we're just going to be so committed to environmental policies because we think that's the right thing? Or was there a naivety where they genuinely thought that you could transition to a green economy in a way that was going to create new jobs for all the jobs that were taken away?
I can't necessarily, assume to know what particularly the leaders of labor and Keir Starmer have decided. But, I did talk with Freddie about the issue just last month. You had the big announcement of a massive gas discovery or resource in in Lincolnshire. 16 trillion cubic feet of recoverable gas, and the resource is even bigger than that. And so this is multiple years of potential. If you just were to rely on that one source of gas, could fuel Britain for years. And yet what is happening now? Instead of drilling for that gas and fracking, a Labor government spokesman said, "Oh, we're going to ban fracking forever. And we're going to go full bore on the clean energy, baloney, the alt energy silliness." I think it's a mix of naivete and some kind of weird idealism, but it's completely wrong-headed. And unfortunately for Britain, and I was in London last month, you're driving that your leadership is driving your economy into the ditch, and it's very dangerous for the long-term health of of Britain.
Do you think factors like this and what's happened at Heathrow last week are going to become, unavoidable? And are Britain's politicians going to change ways in the direction that America has?
Well, let's hope so. I mean, we can pray. I mean, let's do pray, because the global economy needs Britain. The U.S. needs Britain to be strong. And if your economy is only growing by 1%, it's essentially zero growth. Right. So, and your industrial base is crumbling, right? Whether now, the next industry to fall is likely to be automotive, but you also had the closure of the last synthetic ethanol plant in the UK, which closed, in the Grangemouth plant closed in January. So these are very worrisome signs. But if I could, Michael, just shift back to one other quick point, going back to the issues at Heathrow and electricity, because this ties in with these claims around net zero, is that the recovery of that substation at Heathrow won't be quick. Now, they've been able to reroute electricity into the airport, and that's, their, linemen and electrical systems are, they can make these things happen. But one of the critical supply chain issues now that's facing the UK and the rest of the world is availability of these high powered transformers and the vulnerability of the electric grid to their sabotage or failure. And so, there have been press reports that this type of transformer, the wait time could be a year. It could be as many as 4 years. I was in Houston earlier this month for the CERAWeek conference, one of the biggest energy conferences in the world. And for a lot of this high voltage, so whether it's switchgear, arresters, transformers, in many cases, the higher the voltage, the longer the lead times. And in some cases, it's up to 4 years now. And because of this global expansion of electric systems, the electric grids all over the world, and the supply chains simply aren't able to keep up with this demand. So it could be, a year, 2 years or more before that substation, I think it's at Hyde in Britain, is actually back in service.
And do you think that the aviation industry, because it's an older industry, is just not as resilient as some other sectors? There's a data center, I think it's the ARC data center, which apparently was using the same substation that Heathrow used. It was able to stay online the whole time because data centers, just can't afford to ever go offline. Do you think the aviation industry has got some way to catch up on this resilience point?
If you enjoy what we do here at Spectator TV, then why not subscribe to the magazine as well? If you subscribe today, you'll get 12 weeks for just £12, plus a free £20 John Lewis and Waitrose gift card. You can sign up at spectator.co.uk/TV offer.
Well, and it's a very simple fix, Michael. I mean, all you have to do is get a big honking tank of diesel fuel and a bunch of generators. And the data center business, as you point out rightly, they've known this for years. They need 5 nines, 6 nines of reliability. The airports are critical infrastructure as well. So you mentioned as earlier, is this naive, is this bad management? Yes, I would argue that it is. Why didn't the airport have its own system where it could detach from the electric grid and be self-sufficient and operate on its own? And this isn't rocket science, not, or we joke here in Texas, rocket surgery. It's not complicated. You just need a bunch of big honking 1, 2 megawatt, 3 megawatt generators and a big tank of diesel fuel. And I think the load at Heathrow, I mean, it's in the tens of megawatts. That's easily solved. This didn't have to happen. And it did. And it should be yet another wake up call. One, for this net zero silliness. And I've just started going through the net zero plan. And I found it, as I mentioned, Catherine Porter, she's such a sharp reporter, and her blog on What Logic on this has been the definitive account on what happened and what, the problems there. But, this isn't difficult to deal with. This should not have happened had Heathrow been properly prepared.
And is this, lack of preparedness, this mismanagement, is this a British problem? I mean, would an American airport allow something like this to happen?
Well, a lot of and Catherine reported on this, a lot of big airports in the U.S. have their own systems, right? They can detach from the grid in case of a grid failure. So, I'm not going to say that the U.S. has all of this solved. It doesn't. We have a whole lot of airports and a whole lot of critical infrastructure that's older, needs to be replaced. This is a worldwide problem. So, what I hope happens in the wake of this is that this is a real wake up call, not just for the transportation infrastructure and those systems in the UK, but more broadly for Britain, that you have a lot of now strategic vulnerabilities and they're getting worse. And a lot of this is being caused by this insane fixation on net zero. And it's an insane fixation because here's the home of the Industrial Revolution. You've closed your coal plants. You've made yourself almost completely dependent on, not completely, mostly dependent on imported natural gas. In fact, here's a quick fact for you. Nearly 20%, it's actually 18% of the gas in Britain is now coming from the United States. I'm a long way from you. I'm in Austin, Texas, but a lot of that 18% of the gas coming from the U.S. is coming from gas wells in Texas, and it's going all the way across the Atlantic to London to heat your homes. 1 out of every 5 molecules effectively that you're using to heat your water and heat your homes, et cetera, is coming from the United States. And it doesn't have to be that way if you had sensible energy policy.
And if I can put you on the spot slightly and ask you to
Sure.
To gaze into your crystal ball, if you've got one, you mentioned that lots of infrastructure is aging, and we've got this resilience issue in Britain, clearly, as Heathrow's shown. What's the next thing we should worry about? What's the next thing that's going to fall offline and cause disruption to our country?
Wow. Well, I one of the things we talked about and just touched on was the possibility of sabotage, right? And this was one thing that I've written about this before. I wrote about it in I think my 5th book about the vulnerability of the electric grid. It was in 2013 that there was a substation in California. It was called the Metcalf substation, was attacked by saboteurs, and there were no arrests ever made. They shot something like 100 rounds of 7.62 rifle rounds into it, AK-47 size rifle rounds. No one was ever apprehended. So, we could say the Heathrow, the shutdown there was a black swan. well, sabotage could be a black swan, or an extended period of extreme cold weather could also be deadly because you don't have enough natural gas to go around. So I think that, the things that would be top of mind for me if I were an emergency planner in Britain would be, how vulnerable is our critical infrastructure to sabotage, and what will happen if we face some extreme weather event, and are we prepared? Because those are the things that to me seem pretty obvious.
And finally, on how the government does respond to Heathrow and also the threats that you've just laid out there, a lot of the talk we've had about how this country gets growth is that we need to deregulate, we need to get rid of red tape. But the natural response to this will be, well, there's clearly not proper planning regulations in place to say that you need power resilience, you need energy resilience. Do you think that a regulatory response is sensible here, or do we still need to focus on, this push for growth that says, let the market sort these things out and, let's not answer this with more red tape?
Well, it's going to have to be a combination of both, right? Government doesn't have enough money to make all of this happen. It's going to need private industry to step forward. And, I'm very fortunate in my career. I've met a lot of people. I know the company Egdon Resources. It's owned by a Dallas-based firm, Hayco Energy. They're ready to drill in Lincolnshire. They have the leases there it's called the Gainsborough Trough. You have enormous shale resources onshore in Britain that you could turn your gas situation around in a matter of a year or two, if you had the will to do it, if you had the political will to do it. The same goes for, ramping up drilling in the North Sea. So I think it's going to be both, Michael. You're going to have a regulatory response from the government, and Labor and Tories are going to have to agree that this is a national priority, and you have to get going, and you have to get going right damn now. But you're going to need the private sector and companies that are willing to take the risk. And there's going to be a lot of political risk because of all this, back and forth in Britain and the strength of the anti-hydrocarbon lobby. But you're going to need private capital and private industry, and you're going to need a forceful response from government to turn things around. And I sure hope you do.
Robert, thanks very much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.